Welcome, brave souls, to Fear File Chronicles, your one-way ticket to spine-chilling stories and terrifying tales. Tonight, we'll be diving into the darkest corners of the human mind with the story, After the Fall, Part 7, penned by the twisted mind of Locked 334. Together, we'll explore the unexplained and face our deepest fears. But before we begin, if you enjoy trembling in terror, be sure to hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow fear fanatics and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell notification so you never miss an eerie episode. Your support truly means the world to us, so feel free to leave a comment below to join the Fear File Chronicles community. Now, without further ado, let's unravel the mysteries of the unknown together as we delve into tonight's fear-inducing story, After the Fall. Part 7. Dim the lights and prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the Fear File Chronicles. The young men spent the winter training. Tony found himself outshining most of his squad mates. While most of them had come from backgrounds with survival knowledge, Tony had lived it during his year with Colin. His sergeant soon requested that Tony become their training squad leader, tasked with carrying out their daily routine. When the announcement was made, Tony could feel the daggers dig into him from some of the older boys within the group. He knew his promotion would stir bad feelings, but there was little he could do about it. Tony had made a promise, and he would do whatever it took to survive. After one particularly grueling day of traversing the course through harsh winter conditions, the boys took to their bunks, groaning in pain. When Tony's head hit the pillow, his exhaustion brought him to slumber far quicker than it ever had. The grumbles and complaints around him had become common, but they faded as visions of the warm waters of a lake filtered into his mind. He saw Colin standing on a bank as Tony swam, the summer sun warming their bodies. A smile crept across Tony's lips during his sleep until the sun was eclipsed by darkness. He began to gasp, unable to breathe, and slipped under the water. Tony woke to his blanket being forced down on both sides by multiple boys. He quickly struggled to free himself, but their combined strength was too much to protest. Tony screamed into the sock that had been shoved into his mouth, begging for help. Soon, a flurry of fists buried into his abdomen. He was struck repeatedly for several minutes within the dark room of their barracks. Each of them had blacked out their faces to avoid identification, but it did not matter. Tony knew who was attacking him and why. The commotion stirred Duke from his bed. He scrambled from his bunk and across another. When he reached the group, his body dove shoulder first into one of the boys holding down Tony. Another released his hold on the blanket to face Duke, slinging a fist in that direction. Duke quickly evaded, grasping hold of the arm as it passed and tossed the boy to the side. As Duke tried to right himself from the maneuver, another punch landed firmly on his jaw, sending him to the floor. This left one side of Tony's bed partially free, giving the squad leader the ability to free himself with squirms and kicks until his body slid from his bunk. Duke struggled to his feet, the other boys rounding the bed. Tony dropped his heel into one of their knees, which caused it to buckle. Soon, Duke and Tony were back to back, surrounded by the remaining boys. They both bore their fists and prepared to fight as the ones on the floor regained their stance. Tony landed a right hook in one of the boys' ribs, while Duke's knee buried in one's gut. Their attack left them open, and they soon felt knuckles bury themselves in their faces. They stumbled, but came to rest against each other's backs for support. The two advanced again, ready to strike, but just before they could land a hit, the fluorescent lights flicked to life above them, and their sergeant's voice echoed through the hall.
"What in the hell is going on in here?"
All of the boys stood like statues, Tony and Duke turning to face their instructor.
"Squad Leader Stone."
The sergeant's eyes cutting to Tony. The group looked to Tony, his face bruised from the altercation. It was easy to see what had transpired, and all of them knew the consequences of their actions. Several boys shuffled their feet behind Tony, preparing nervously for their punishment. Tony had no reason to defend them, But he also knew that if they were punished for fighting, then so would he and Duke. It only took him a few seconds to make his decision. He stood at attention, steadying himself, and cleared his throat.
Everything is fine, sir. Just a sparring session.
Tony lied.
Well, it's over now. It's lights out. Clean yourself up and get to bed.
All of the boys quickly made their way back to their bunks. Tony stood at attention until all of his men were back in bed, staring at the sergeant. Buzzkill gave the boy a slight nod, knowing what he had done for his fellow squad mates, before turning and leaving the room. When the lights went out again, Tony slid back into his bed and pulled his blanket up over his aching body. Every muscle screamed at him in pain, but he would not let it show. There were whispers around the room as he closed his eyes and tried to return to his dream, despite how much he hurt. When they were roused by the morning bugle, each boy made their bed, dressed for the day, and stood at attention at the end of their bunk. Tony stood at the end of the aisle, counting them off as each member of his squad took their place. His eyes fell on 6 empty bunks. Tony stared at them, noticing the neatly made beds. His trance was broken by the sound of Sergeant Buzzkill announcing their orders for the day. They would be participating in a live fire exercise, and they were to report to the indoor firing range. Tony turned on his heel and ordered his men to follow him. They marched down the hall, their instructor walking in tandem with Tony.
Permission to speak, sir.
Permission granted.
Where are my men, sir?
They are not your men anymore. We don't need soldiers like that here.
The group entered the indoor range and took a place at each position. Tony knelt and retrieved his issued AR-15, readying it for use. Buzzkill stood at the end of the line, hand resting on a lever. When it was pulled, their targets would drop from the ceiling. They were instructed to ready themselves, release the safety, and prepare to fire. Tony took his stance and adjusted his breathing, his finger preparing to reach for the trigger. Buzzkill dropped the lever, the opening in the ceiling parting, and 6 large figures hanging from ropes with their heads covered in black bags appeared. Tony's eyes shot open at the sight, his hand loosening its grip on the rifle. None of the boys fired a shot, but stared at the targets in front of them with nooses around their necks.
Fire!
Sir?
I said fire!
No, stand down.
Tony replied, looking back to his men.
Excuse me, Stone. What did you just say?
Buzzkill's eyes grew wide, and the veins in his face grew close to bursting. Tony had grown accustomed to firing at training dummies in sandbags. But this felt wrong. Each boy clicked the safety on their rifle, holding it at an angle as they came to attention. Tony followed suit, his face a mirror of his inner conflict. The boys hanging from the ceiling were already dead. He knew this. There was no sense, no honor in defiling their corpses. These boys hadn't deserved this. The squad leader, eyes curled in anger, stared at the instructor.
Stone, you understand that if you and your men don't fire on those targets, you will pay the price?
Yes, sir, I do.
Tony's response echoed through the firing range.
Very well. The rest of you return to your barracks. Stone, come with me.
Buzzkill disarmed Tony as the rest of the squad exited. His heavy hand rested on Tony's shoulder.
Follow me, boy.
Tony's gaze lingered on Duke. A sense of worry etched on his friend's face. He nodded reassuringly, assuring Duke all would be well, even if he didn't believe it himself. Then, led by Buzzkill, he exited through another door and down the hallway. They halted at a door, flanked by 2 armed guards. Buzzkill handed the AR-15 to one of them before the other opened the door. Tony was guided inside by his instructor's firm hand. Inside, he was placed at a small desk, the kind you might see in a classroom. Across the room, Buzzkill sat in one of the many chairs lining the wall. The door swung open again. Uniformed men entered in single file. Each took a seat across the room while Tony watched the sergeant stand, salute, and hold it until each man was seated. These uniforms were more intricate than Tony's, each adorned with a patch signifying they were Apex Predator forces. When Buzzkill dropped his salute, he called for a folder. One of the guards entered, clutching a file that looked like the one filled with Tony's information. The folder was handed to the man at the front of the line, who began scanning its contents.
So, this is the one you've been bragging about, Sergeant?
The man questioned from the shadows.
Yes, sir. I believe he has what it takes.
The man passed the folder down as he finished reading.
You think, or you know?
I know, sir.
Buzzkill corrected himself. The man stood and approached the light. Under the dim glow, Tony made out his features. A terribly scarred face. One eye glassy and wider than natural. Tony concluded this man must be blind in that eye. His close-cropped hair and build suggested a history of combat.
My name is General Foreman.
His voice was deep, echoing in Tony's ears.
Who are you, kid?
I'm Toe.
Tony almost slipped.
Stone, sir.
The group chuckled.
Stone. You look like a pebble to me.
Tony held back an eye roll at the General's words.
So, you want to be a predator?
Confusion washed over Tony. He'd never expressed any interest in combat.
I just want to survive, sir. I made a promise to survive.
Promise, huh? To who?
The General smirked. Tony's thoughts drifted to Colin.
A friend. And I intend on keeping it, no matter what.
Foreman turned back to the other men, officers by the looks of it. They conversed in hushed tones for several minutes, deliberating a decision that baffled Tony. Each nodded slowly, seemingly casting their votes. Buzzkill looked back at Tony, giving a nod that everything was fine. But Tony's trust wavered. This man had just ordered him to shoot the lifeless body of a boy. His mind raced, wondering what Colin would do. Before he could find an answer, General Foreman towered over him again.
Okay, Private Stone, we are going to see if you have what it takes.
Foreman announced with a smile. The officers left the room just as they had entered. Tony was alone with Sergeant again. The folder was placed on the desk before him as he received a detailed explanation of the next phase of training. He and the other recruits accepted would be taken for further training. Those who didn't make the cut would be assigned other duties. Tony then questioned the fate of the 6 boys who had seemingly been killed. Buzzkill laughed.
They aren't dead, kid. Just relocated. Those bodies belong to enemies who died in combat.
Wait, what?
Tony stammered, struggling to comprehend.
It was a test to see if you would shoot or act on your better instincts.
Buzzkill smirked.
And you passed, kid.
Well, my friends, we've reached the end of tonight's chilling tale, After the Fall, Part 7, by the talented Lock 334. I hope you've enjoyed our descent into darkness, and that you'll carry a piece of the Fear File Chronicles with you as you drift into uneasy dreams. If our story left you shivering and shaking, don't forget to like this video, share it with others who crave a good scare, and subscribe to the Fear File Chronicles for more haunting horrors. Remember to hit the bell notification so you're always among the first to know when a new nightmare awaits. As always, we appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your fears and frights with us truly means a lot, so don't be shy to engage with our sinister community. Until next time, remember to embrace the darkness, for it is within the shadows that our most terrifying stories are born. Good night and stay scared.